How are you all?
Very good.
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 Where's our Mexican friend today?
He's sick.
Oh,
Yes, he has a virus. He thinks that it's most probably not the COVID, but he's not good enough to. He's not feeling well enough to be here.
okay. Well, let's hope it's not serious, COVID or otherwise. Okay, so are you ready to start?
Ready to learn from you.
No, I'm ready to learn from you. Get my Spanish and Portuguese improved today. So I gave you some homework to pick sort of a passage from your sample translations and to compare it using the hierarchy of equivalences which we were looking at in the book. So, who wants to start and show us what you found?
Yeah, I can start this time.
Okay.
Let me share here. So near the end, I'm not really sure about what kind of equivalence it is, but yeah, we can have a look at and see. So this novel is very funny, and it kind of smells the small villages of France in the south of France. So it has a lot of exotic things, and so it is very difficult to translate. And there's a lot of, I think it must have been quite difficult for the translator. So for this homework, it has a lot of
What's the name of the book? Is a book also?
Tartarin de Tarascon.
Uh-huh.
Maybe you have heard about that.
Mm-hmm.
No. Yeah. I'm sure that Nerea must have read it at some point.
Good.
Okay. So here, for denotative, I kind of understood that it's kind of more or less direct equivalence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for that, then there is here a pretty little Tarascon villa, which does jolie petite villa tarasconnaise. So we have the adjective here.
Yeah.
That's in French in the original, and then because I don't know, in English it might not work that way, then they put Tarascon. They said the name of the city instead of the village. So there's nothing much to change. And then, well, I think any, yes, I did a mistake here writing. Mire très blanche. And I found that at this time, in French, they seem to be putting these dashes in between things like very white, which we don't do anymore today.
Okay.
But then here again, it's very white, and très blanc, it's kind of very also quite straightforward translation.
Yeah.
So that's fine. I didn't take more of them because it's kind of the usual way of doing things. And then here,
I just want to pick up on that word usual. Yes. Maybe, just remember that we might be able to find a better adjective than usual, but
yes,
the
default way.
The default way, we could say, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then after for connotative, then it seemed to me that it implied some connotation, and that we had to adapt the connotation on the target language, which is the case here. So we have the third house, à main droite, so on the left hand, and it was translated in English, but on the left.
Mm-hmm.
So then we leave completely the idea of having a hand somewhere, this metaphor of the hand to talk about the side, but we just say on the left. Does it sound right to you as a connotative equivalence? Or maybe I'm mistaken?
But in French, can you say to the left in another way?
À droite, yeah.
Ah, okay, okay.
Troisième maison à droite, that would be the
À droite,
normal
à
way.
gauche ou à droite.
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this is really
Yes.
the choice of the author to put
Yes, yes, yes,
there
yes.
the main
Yes,
main
gauche.
the hand. Okay.
Yes, yeah. Actually, this gives the impression that we are in a kind of very old village with people who still live like 100 years ago and have this little simplistic way of referring to things with their hands and physical parts of their body and things like that.
Mhm.
I think that's a
So there's a
really.
simplification.
Hmm.
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah. And Katerina, that is an excellent question. You know, that's exactly the question we need to be asking here is, you know, I think I sort of said this in another lesson, like what is not on the page, you know? So your question of, is there a simpler way to write it in French? Yes, and that's what we need to ask. Is there another way that they chose not to use? So
Yeah. And then they kind of left out something very important in the story, l'intrépide Tartarin, in order to give this impression that it's a hero, which is kind of fat and a lot of things, but he has a lot of, he's depicted a little bit like the hero of in the Spanish novel that we have seen. You know, this guy with his I don't remember the
Quixote?
name now. Sorry?
Don Quixote.
Don Quixote, yes, yes. It's a little bit the same kind of personage. So you have this guy who is a hunter and says that he went to Africa and has everything about hunting and Africa, etc. And then he is kind of, but still he has a very big belly, and then he has a big mustache and looks more like a kind of bragging farmer than anything else. So it's kind of ironic to say here intrépide, the intrepid Tartarin, and it has been left aside.
Yes, it's very strange.
Yes, and they just put at that time Tartarin lived near the entrance to the town, so leaving completely this adjective on this thing that gives this depiction of him. Yeah, so this is something on something else.
yeah,
and then here another connotation here is kind of, maybe it's a literal translation that I don't know about, but game. Sadly, however, there's a shortage of game. In fact, there's the total absence of game. And here in French, it is gibier, which means like animals that you're going to hunt down.
okay, that is the word in English as well. Yeah, game.
It's the standard word, the default word, game.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's sort of a totally separate meaning of the same four letters.
Okay.
To the meaning that everybody knows, which of course is like, you know, something to play.
Mm-hmm.
But game, for some reason, these four letters also have the meaning of wild animals that you hunt. Yeah, you know.
Yeah. Could it be that in the past it was a game to actually go hunting?
I'd have to look in an etymological dictionary to answer that one. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
Gibier.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But then there are also other things that are interesting, even in those small passages that I have found, because it's so kind of how do you say the word? It's so typical of this French bragging style and from the inside of the small villages, that even in this one here, for example, c'est superbe à voir. It's beautiful to see. They translated it is a splendid spectacle.
Hmm.
So then there's already different way of saying things, which then maybe not a kind of connotative equivalence, but some other equivalence. And
Hmm.
also here, par malheur, le gibier manque. Il manque absolument. So then we don't have the second game, which is here. There's just the pronoun. And then the word absolument has been rendered as there is a total absence of. And this small comma here has been translated as in fact.
Hmm.
So those are other, but yeah.
This is interesting because I think punctuation. I like punctuation as as something important, and
Yeah.
the fact that you can sometimes translate punctuation with words, and the other way around. You can also take words, especially these conjunctions and things like this. And especially what you're looking at. It sounds to me like this is written in a quite a spoken way.
It is in spoken way, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we speak, a lot of what we're doing is we're putting things in a certain order, and we're, the meaning is coming, our argument we are building because of the way, it's different to when we're writing, we structure things more.
Yes.
And so this is, that's interesting what you've picked up there.
Yes. Yeah. And about the punctuation, generally speaking, since I think it's really something oral, they make an ending sentences in French, because like someone speaking, then he just not stops or puts like a point virgule. I don't know how this is called in English. Semicolon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Semicolon.
So semicolon, yes, instead of putting a full stop. But then in English, they they make a lot of different sentences, much more than in French. I don't know if I found it here, but yeah, for example, down here, so they started a new sentence on this one, and then here there was just a comma.
Yeah. This happens between German and English a lot as well.
Okay. Sorry, Craig.
Yeah. No, I'm going to say German is more liberal with its sort of commas to separate things that English treats as separate sentences. So we do this. Katarina, you wanted to?
You had a sentence there with
Yeah.
first meeting. Where is it? Not the first meeting of the. I saw something like.
Yeah, and actually, the reason why there's so much difference in the original, the way it's translated, is because it's it's meant to be grandiloquent, so much more kind of heroic than it actually is. So the style makes it sound very heroic and quite ironic on the side as well, and humoristic. So I think that's why the English has...
Comunidad inoubliable.
And when is the translation from? When was the translation made? Because there might be also a difference in time, because the novel is quite is 19th century, end of
19th century, yes. Yeah. And the translation I didn't find. I think it comes from Gutenberg. So let's see.
Do you think that has something to do also in the way, the choice of the words, if it's late time, if it's modern?
Yeah,
then
maybe, yeah.
Very different words.
Yes.
1872.
Toad of the Toad Hole was from braggart, easily deceived but good-hearted au fond. So yeah, this is more or less the person, and corresponds to the Spanish. I just forgot his name again.
Don Quixote.
Don Quixote, yes. Yeah. So yeah.
Some 12 to 6 is my first meeting.
Yeah, and so
Ah,
this
it's
is
12 or 15.
12
Ma
years.
préva est resté dans ma vie. Ah, ok, it's separate.
Yeah, yeah.
Il y a 12 qui, mais je m'en souviens
Yes.
mieux qu'hier. Yeah.
Yeah, and so for this, actually, the sentence has been completely restructured. And I'm not really sure, but Craig, you're going to tell me if I'm right or not, but it looks like they try to correspond to the code of novels in English, where starting with something like my first visit of Tartarin Tarascon stayed in my life like a unforgettable date, maybe a little bit flat. And so starting with something like, although it is now 12 or 15 years in my first meeting with, kind of give some more, no?
I'm just looking, yeah.
Guess that would be more, let's say, to like be more pragmatic in the sense of meeting the reader.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but here it is, since it's the beginning of a chapter or a paragraph, then it is trying to comply with, I read it as trying to comply with the norms of the
18th century novel, English novel,
not
you say?
to the style of novels in general, not necessarily
Okay,
of a
not the
specific
18th
time.
system.
Yes,
Mhm.
but maybe I'm totally wrong. I don't know at all. Craig should know better than that than me.
I'm just sort of thinking about this, yeah, because if I look at the French, if I pretend I'm the translator, then again, I've got this very sort of, topic first structure. So we've got like, my first visit, that's the topic. And then afterwards, we've got the information about that. It was,
Yes.
it's now 12 or 15 years, but I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yes.
So there's quite a spoken way of structuring things. So I'm just trying to think if I could, how would I do that in English? My first visit is like a date I could never forget. I mean, I think it would be perfect if I'm right. If the rest of the English is also fairly informal because he's matching the style somehow, then I can start in English. I can start with that sentence, so I can preserve the order a little bit better or a little bit more strictly than this translator does, and it will still be okay, I think.
Yeah. Actually, this is the starting of the whole novel, of the whole book. Starts here. The first sentence. I don't know if that changes something.
Actually, in the French, the idea of stating my life is something which is more powerful because it's not just a memory that it's been kept alive. It's something that was extremely important in your life, and the translator doesn't put a life. Which of course for an opening of a book it's important because it's really a huge statement, right?
Yeah, this is missing, right, in the translation. There are quite a bit of passages that the translator simply did not translate at all. I don't know if he did not manage or didn't want or any other reason.
If this is the first sentence, as you say, then when I read the French, I'm like, ma première visite, c'est resté dans ma vie de cela, mais je m'en souviens mieux que toi. There's 3 first persons in that sentence, so I'm expecting, a first person narrative novel now. This is the narrator, and I'm going to be listening to this narrator for the rest of the novel.
Yeah.
Whereas in English, it's, there's one my, which I hardly even noticed, it's like, it's right in the middle there. It's not even, it's sort of part of a noun, basically, my first meeting. So that there's no active first persons. The memory remains as fresh. That's a very passive structure.
Mm.
So this first sentence in English does not set up for me a very strong impression that, you know, I'm now going to be reading a first person narrative. It's not yet clear. Maybe the second sentence does. So it's not, you know, we don't want to get too, but then again, yeah. So there's no I's or my's. It's a different. It's slightly different. I think I mean, basically, I'm. You know, what I haven't said yet is that I actually, you know, I think I agree with you what you said, which is that this first sentence has been formalized a bit into a novel type, more written register, you know. So
yeah, but is it just the difference between the way of thinking of English people in general, because they're in a society that is much more kind of uptight than in the villages like that in the south of France, where everyone is bragging around all the time? Is it that different, or really that's how novels are written in English?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I'm not a literature expert, but I would, you know, I would say that we have, you know, we have lots of different types of novels, and we have lots of first person narratives that are a bit, we have our informalities, you know, so no, wouldn't.
So the translator was not able to convey the impression or the taste, let's say.
And certainly in the, you know, in this sentence, it's a question I would have, you know, I'd read some more to, you know, to come up with a you know, a review of the translation. You'd have to read the whole book, of course, but
yes,
but yeah, it's, I mean, we've definitely noticed something quite interesting there.
And then there's this here semicolon again, which clearly distinguishes this first sentence and the second part. And in English, we have only one single sentence also.
Yeah.
So the French looks like much more oral because of this than the English, which kind of made a more convoluted, complex sentence.
Yeah, I think that might be, we might be verging into, you know, what here Collet calls the formal equivalence, you know, because we're looking at the different register between sort of written and spoken. That might be more formal than text normative. But again, you know, I don't think all of these are clearly, you know, one to sort of, you know.
Okay. Yeah, and then here also ending by this "mais je m'en souviens mieux que d'hier" is clearly an oral turn of phrase, which is like you say something and then, yes, but I remember that this and that happened. So it's also giving this kind of village-like flavor. People who did not really get a high education, but are able to tell stories and kind of entertain people.
Yeah, I mean, we could, you know, there's really no reason not to translate that more strictly. You know, I remember it as if it were yesterday. It's perfectly normal spoken English, so it's definitely a decision the translator made there to sort of move it towards the written register.
Okay. And then we have these. There again, it is this small 3 dots at the end, point suspension, that translate into well. And my goodness is coquin de sort, which is, let's see what Google says for as a literal translation of that.
Coquin.
Where is French? Rascal of Fate.
Oh, now we're back in the 19th century now. Rascal of Fate.
That would be more literal, but then it turns into, my goodness.
What? I mean, when do you say this? Coquin Saw. When would you say?
So yeah, this I would see some old guy, let's say 70 or 80 years, who is kind of hit himself on the road or fell or something, and then he says, such a bad luck or something like that.
So you're not referring to the coquin, it's just an expression.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just to say my fate is so bad. This is not what I want. I'm not expecting this.
Yeah, okay. So my goodness is just, it's upper class English from a long time ago. So, yeah, we could definitely this is, we're definitely in the connotative or perhaps the pragmatic sort of sense here, because this is, for this particular Coquin de Saw, you really need to know who says it, what social group, what.
Yes.
Particular readership, of course, is, you could say this is pragmatic because, we're looking at the readership of this book, but you could also say that it's connotative because it's like, what sort of connotations? I mean, I've automatically given you a few connotations with rascal and my goodness. What does it suggest to me? So we're.
Yeah. So that was one thing, and then something else is, from outside the place looked perfectly ordinary, and the original says, this house didn't look like anything. It's an expression. And didn't look like anything special, I would say. N'avait l'air de rien.
Yeah.
And then this has been turned into perfectly ordinary. So it's kind of flipped upside down.
Well, we will see this in chapter 4. This is a translation strategy where you sort of, you take something that's expressed in a sort of a negative way and you take the opposite adjective and use the positive, so things like this. But yeah, nothing special, or it didn't look like anything special. I think would be a good equivalent. So we also have to look at the English, the use of one in English. From outside the place looked perfectly ordinary. One would never have believed. I mean, this is just so. There's a certain social classes that use one.
It's higher or lower?
Higher social classes.
Higher. Yes, yeah. Then yeah. So
and the sort of the French doesn't yet. My knowledge of the French doesn't connote those social classes yet. So it's a bit out of place. It sounds like this has been translated by sort of an English gentleman who went to France and really amused himself reading this book and thought he would translate it for his chums back in England.
Okay. Yeah. The French is on, which is very, very ordinary.
Yeah.
Or nothing special. Yeah.
This is a real, an everyday, quite serious translation issue for many language combinations. Is the the third person impersonal, the one, which in English is just, as I said, it's missing unless you happen to belong to this particular social class, and German has it as well. German just has man, M-A-N, which is the same as the French or N. And you just use it. Man sagt, or here geht man entlang. Here one goes along this road, and it's just, if I said that in English, it would sort of, I'd be in some posh country lane saying, yes, we go along, one goes along this road, and then one comes to the end of the street, and there goes one goes to church, you know, and it's like Downton Abbey, you would hear that, but
Okay. Yes, and then the whole establishment also, in order to say demeure, which is kind of just the house.
No, this is the gentleman again. This is the English gentleman translator. The gentleman translator, you know.
Okay.
We'll just call this guy the gentleman translator, whoever did this, you know, it's like might be a gentlewoman, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're in that sort of, you know, I mean, any set of, you know, any typology, you know, we have a typology of equivalences here, the 5, you know. Within that, of course, you know, we're going to find examples where they may or may not fall into one or more of these, you know, types. You know, we could analyze this as a formal equivalence because of the stylistic, you know, because it's sort of the type, the genre. We could analyze it as, you know, connotative because of certain connotations. Of certainly when you say quant de sort, you know, I mean, I imagine loads of connotations there. So
yeah,
they're not, you know, these are not sort of things that are mutually exclusive. These are more like bubbles that overlap, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but they're nice examples. Yeah. And
then the next one is here, the garden. The garden. But then here again in French it was de Tartarin. So Tartarin's garden. But I guess that if you say that in English, Tartarin's garden, then you lose this idea that we're focusing on the garden itself, maybe.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay, yeah. Then it's an omission again.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, this is quite interesting. And they put a lot of suspension. How do you say the 3 dots?
Ellipsis, I think, yeah.
Oh, yes, yeah. Then he used quite a lot more ellipses than you have in French. We had seen here again for after game, ellipsis here again, and in French there's none of it.
Yeah, this example with the game one is the comma, you know. So
okay.
The comma separating 2 sort of independent phrases, he's translating as an ellipsis because you're trying to reflect that one runs into the other, but you can't really just put a comma there in English. It's more of a full stop, but he doesn't want to make a full stop. He wants to, you know. So this is more the equivalent of the comma.
Okay. Yeah. So then
it seems that it becomes everything more impersonal because it's the question how he began. Then he doesn't. He takes out some of the traits of Tartarin and plus he, instead of talking about his house like jamais on serait cru devant la demeure d'un héros, it's a very personal thing, and he turns it into the old establishment. So the old tone becomes less personal, more impersonal.
Good observation, yeah.
For sure. Yeah, and then this is also interesting. There was not another like it in Europe. And in French, you have this kind of juicy expressions that says there was not 2 of the same kind like this in Europe. Il n'y en avait pas 2 comme celui-là en France, en Europe. So, yeah.
There was not another one like it in Europe.
Yes, yeah.
We could put a 1 in there in English. There wasn't another one. There was not another one. There was no other. There was no. Yeah. I think, yeah, this is. What is this? This is quite a complicated I would sort of be tempted to analyze this as lexis, you know, because lexis is not always just one word. It's sort of a fixed phrase in French, isn't it? It's a
Yes,
fixed
an expression.
thing.
Yes, yeah.
Of
Idiomatic expression. Yeah.
And so it translates into this fairly fixed phrase into English as well. So
Okay.
although the elements are not matching perfectly because there's no mention of a two, it might even become a one. They're still quite equivalent. So we're you know, it would be interesting to speak to Koller himself or herself to sort of say, you know, what exactly they had in mind. But you know, I think this is reasonable lexis. As you know, we can analyze this as lexical equivalent, as a denotative equivalent.
Okay.
What do you call lexis?
Well, lexis is sort of what linguists tend to say instead of saying vocabulary or words. So,
Meaning, it's a word.
Hmm?
Meaning, what is expression? Colloquial expression, idiomatic expression, or
No.
something like that? No.
Something part of the vocabulary.
Ah, just okay. Like il n'y a pas deux, comme celui-là would be lexis. He said.
Yes. Yeah. You can't really say a word because let's say pomme de terre.
Yeah.
Is not a single word.
Oh.
At the same time, it's one lexis because it refers to a single reference in the outer world.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would appreciate if you guys go and define exactly. I got stuck trying to understand what each of these was.
Yes.
It'd be nice to have just one sentence for each, exactly what it means in simple words, because in the book I found it a bit complicated.
Yeah. Okay. Again,
it doesn't need to be now, but before we end the session, it would be nice to.
Yeah. We're you know, what we have to, one of the problems with, well, not one of the problems, but one of the things we have to deal with, you know, in this course is that we're looking at different theories devised by different people to try and describe the same thing. And so all of these different people, sometimes they are deliberately trying to distance themselves from someone else, and sometimes they are more trying to further develop an idea, you know. So at times people will deliberately try to take a different word to their predecessor to make their theory clearly different, but actually they're referring to the same thing. So they've taken a different word and tried to create sort of a different definition. So, you know, we have this term, for example, the first type of equivalence here is denotative. You know, what does it denote? Denote is a very sort of, you know, it's not a word I use every day. But what, you know, Drupchan already sort of mentioned, you know, it refers to sort of one sort of structure, meaning structure, one item of meaning, one, you know, what does it denote? What does it refer to? And so a lot of what we're dealing with at list level will be also lexis, which is reflected in the table in the book. They, you know, they say that this is the focus here is lexis, because, you know, lexis is also often a word or a phrase or a fixed expression that refers to a particular concept or a particular thing, you know. So there's going to be a very big overlap. So, you know, I'm often here, I've been saying this is more, from my point of view, this is more lexical, just because, you know, it's not sort of pragmatic, or it's not sort of at sociological level or something like this. It's more sort of a word equivalent or a phrase equivalent. So, you know, it's, don't, please, you know, I appreciate your, you know, request to clarify, because sometimes we will be using words in slightly different ways and it will get confusing. So But if I just interrupt Drupchen, to go through these and give you a quick, simple, how I understand these 5, from the words that are being used, then I've already sort of said the first one is denote, to name the piece of meaning that is being referred to. Then you have the connotations. So that's almost, for me, that's almost the same as sort of associations. It's, what those bells that ring, those things, those pictures you get, not the immediate meaning, but the sort of ones like I was talking about, sort of saying, oh, if I see one would, if I see the use of the word one in this way in English, then I automatically get this connotation of a more upper class narrator, or Drupchen pointed out the use of the word establishment here has a different connotation than the French demeure, because it just conjures up different pictures. They'll all be buildings, but they're sort of different.
Connotation is clear in the book.
Yeah.
Is the other definitions, like the interaction with textual factors, connotative dimensions in different languages, these things are less clear.
Yeah.
The correlation of patterns of usage with functional text analysis.
Okay, so yeah, I can't explain that very quickly. We have a chapter on that later in the book. We're looking, the text normative one is really, the word norm here, of course, is like the norms, the standards. Again, it's not a clear distinction between that and connotation, because of course norms lead to connotations. So if there's a norm for saying this in a particular communicative situation, then that will also be something you get as a picture in your head. So but it's, if there was if there was like a swear word, you could say that was here, but again, swear words would probably come more into pragmatics. So we're really, it's really, really difficult to draw some really thick lines between these, because I don't know, what is the difference between a communicative situation, or which would be text normative, and the communicative conditions, which would be pragmatic. It really just depends what model you're working with, where these boundaries. For me, pragmatics is very, very wide. So we're sort of, with a text normative, we're looking more at the functions. So there's more of like certain communicative functions. We're going to be if this expression or this word is used with a particular communicative purpose in one language, and that isn't conveyed in the other language, then we need to look at that as a translator, which is also going to very much depend on the situation in the book, because obviously how this is being used in context is plays a role there, because I can say the same word in one type of sentence without that purpose, but I can say it in another sentence with a particular purpose. So that's why in the book they say that text normative is reflecting the situation, the communicative situation it's being used in. So if it's just the narration in a book, that's a little bit less likely to be what we're looking at. But if you've got a dialogue in a book, a conversation between two characters, that's going to be more, it's going to be quite important then, The pragmatics, looking at an overall translation of a piece of fiction, pragmatics, we're going to be talking about readership. What readership are we looking at? I'm just reading out of the book here, but pragmatics in terms of, in an individual passage in the book, again, if you're looking at a dialogue that you're translating in the novel, the pragmatics are going to be almost indistinguishable from what I previously was talking about, because the pragmatics are sort of, am I trying to demonstrate my power here over the other person I'm talking to, or am I trying to show respect to them, and so is my choice of vocabulary doing all of this? Am I, again, it's very much the things that are not necessarily in the vocabulary or lexis, they're not necessarily in the grammar, but they are definitely related to purpose and things like this. So
if I can just give an example for pragmatics to make it clear. The classical example is the window is open, it's night, for example, the wind is coming in, and instead of asking the person to whom you're talking to go and close the window, you just say, it's cold, and then you rub your arm. So you're saying something in order to induce the person to do something else. So you're not exactly saying what you're meaning, but it still conveys that meaning. That's pragmatics.
Okay, that's why it says overriding the requirements of other equivalencies. That was the part I was not understanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you might be able to, if in English it is completely normal to sit there and go, "Oh, I'm cold," when actually what you want to say is, "Please close the window." It may be possible to translate that word for word into French, and say, "Il me fait froid." But that might not be a completely normal thing to do in France, when actually what you want is for someone to close the window. That's the pragmatics of it. So the lexical equivalence is there. The connotations, again, it really depends on your definition of that word, but in this model, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about connotation there. We would, it's not particularly slang, or it's not particularly archaic or anything like this. We could say that was sort of text normative, because we're looking at a communicative situation, but it really is the classic example of pragmatics, that I'm actually trying to say something else other than the words that I've expressed. So yeah, overrides in that sense, And formal, formal we've already looked at a little bit, because we've seen that the English translation here has a more sort of written novel type feeling to it or style to it than the French. We would be looking at sort of, as it says in the book, sort of use of rhyme, metaphors, that sort of thing. I'm looking at it as more like genre, style, that sort of.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. This is much clearer.
Okay, good. Yeah, please, hate for the lesson to go by and at the end you say, well, I didn't really understand much. So, So, Drupchen, shall we move on to someone else, or have you got some very pertinent examples to show us of the next ones?
Then for the former, it was kind of more difficult to find. Yes. Yeah, but there was this was kind of nice also. Animals may be dumb, but they're not so stupid. They're not stupid. And here in French, there's a very neat play with words. Si bête que soient les bêtes. So vous pensez bien qu'à la longue, elles ont fini par se méfier, which is kind of completely different way of saying the same thing. So here it says, it will be obvious for you that along the time, then they started to be cautious about living there. And then here, instead of animals may be dumb, you have even if beasts are stupid, yeah, something like that. So here again, it's drawing from the heroic vocabulary of legends, etc. And then that does not come into the English.
Right. Yeah, that's a good, good to know that, in the French it draws on that sort of legends, the heroic style. So that seems to be what is meant by this formal equivalence here, not being really not being matched. Yeah, we would say this is not formally equivalent, wouldn't we?
Yeah. And then let's say the last one is, let us examine how he acquired his crown. And that translates, now let's say from where he got this royalty. So it's kind of, but it's at the same time, it's intentionally ironic, and intentionally we're talking about someone who is just a nice guy in the village that kind of has a lot of dreams and thinks of him very highly. And so the author draws from this very royal vocabulary and ways of talking in order to be ironic. So maybe, he acquired this crown. Looks like a good choice for that passage, at least.
Yeah, in English, sometimes the crown, has a more abstract meaning. It doesn't necessarily just mean the object on the top of his head, but, it sort of is a very clear reference to royalty in that sense, His Majesty, his royalty might not work as well, Yeah.
Yes, and then this is also something very nice. With a close clipped wiry beard, and then in French we only have a very strong beard that is short. So we are kind of looking at the same thing from a completely different angle.
Yeah, the English is almost more. In this example, he sort of he's managed to bring that in the English that's been missing in some of the other examples. Yeah, it's quite I think it fits what you've been describing so far in the French. I think the English fits quite well there. Close clipped, wiry beard.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think I think you found some really interesting examples there, and hopefully we've learnt. We've been able to practice trying to match them to the Collet's typology here. Great, thanks. Who wants to go next? Nerea, come on, let's have a look.
Nerea didn't get to step 2 because I couldn't understand what I had to look for. And I was trying to do the exercise before the class, so I couldn't go from one, past the first step. I didn't know what to look for exactly.
Okay, right.
Sorry, but I'll try.
Okay, no worries. Let's have a look. Danny?
Yes. No, I'm not. I wasn't quite sure it was correct. Now I'm sure it's not correct. But let's see. Here this passage in Portuguese. If I would be very literal, would say, when I surprise myself, it could be in the depths of the mirror. Then it seems to me that it was a bit changed because of to be a better way of communicate this sentence. Then I thought it was programmatic, but now I'm
Okay.
not sure. Yeah, it's
So
just
explain it to us
written.
again.
Yeah, it's just written when I suddenly see myself. It's not like this in Portuguese. It's like quando me surpreendo. It's like when I surprise myself. It's not even say when I see myself. Maybe it could also be connotative.
Anybody
Thinking about
else?
the meaning. Yeah. Katarina, you that understand both sentences, what do you think?
But what do you feel that it's not rendering because for me, the first reading, when I suddenly see myself in the depth of the mirror, I take fright. Quando me surpreendo ao fundo do espelho, assusto-me. For me, there's a quite close effect of the original.
For me, not, because in Portuguese, I don't see I see myself.
Okay, just to,
I would say, yeah.
just
because
to clarify,
when I
can I clarify the task? Just to say, we're not necessarily looking all the time for things that don't succeed. We may find something that does succeed, that is a very good translation. What we are trying to do is identify what type of equivalence it is. So, you know, with Drupchen, quite a few of his examples were actually where we were sort of calling doubt on those equivalences. But it might be the case here that we have a really nice equivalence, and what we want to do is to analyze what type of equivalence it is, you know, just to clarify the task.
Yes, I would say that the connotative level, it's there in the attempt of the translator to render the meaning of when you surprise yourself, because in Portuguese, surpreender means something that you are surprised with, because it's like a glimpse. You like if you pass in front of a mirror and suddenly you're surprised by your image.
But the surprise is missing there. There's no surprise.
No, but he tries to give it rendering in with the suddenly.
And
yes,
in Portuguese,
no
she's not saying she's seeing herself. I think that's the point where I thought that maybe the translator tried to make a communicative version of it.
Well, I don't know, Craig, in English, if the suddenly doesn't have also a bit of sometimes the connotative meaning of being taken by surprise. I suddenly saw something. Doesn't it render a bit of this kind of surprise? So it maybe try to do that. So that would be a kind of connotative attempt. Either you think he failed or the person failed or not, but it's a connotative attempt to.
Would you see it as a connotative or more like, I would see more like the denotative or text normative, isn't it?
I mean,
do you know what? I'm just gonna stir this one up a little bit, because you know it's nice to have a little debate. And I'm going to say that it's actually lexical. It's actually right up in the denotative area, what we're talking about here. Because, you know, and I'm certainly, you know, I'm just going to make this argument a little bit for the sake of it, just to get us thinking. But it's what Katarina is saying, really. I'm sort of more on Katarina's side, is that if we look at the sort of the, at the lexical level, what does what is it denoting? It is denoting this surprise, yeah, which this sort of something, and there's an emotion there. There's an unexpectedness. There's a quickness. It's not taking a long time. There's something quickly, and what is the situation? The situation is that there's a mirror. So presumably there's also a looking in the mirror, because you're in the depths of the mirror, so you're looking into it. So there, even if the seeing is not referred to directly in the Portuguese, there's the situation, the mirror is definitely something you see, you look into. So all of that meaning is there, and it's just being reflected with slightly different lexis in the two different languages. So we've got the time, the short time is being reflected in suddenly in English, but in surprise in Portuguese, or surpreendo. The mirror is doing all of the work in Portuguese, but in English it's being assisted by the verb see. So I think if you analyze it at that level, you can also say that this is this is a lexical situation, or a denoting situation. What we are denoting is actually almost emotion. So that's why we're overlapping with the connotative level, because the connotative is also about emotion. But we're actually describing emotion. The fact of the matter is that there's emotion happening here. So there we go. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, I'm still missing the surprise element.
Você tá mutado.
Yeah,
I could hear you guys.
I'm still missing that
It's so
surprise,
much.
because if I suddenly see myself, well, it's like I suddenly stand up. I don't see the surprise in there.
I think if you, I think Katarina's already said this, but if you take the whole sentence, I suddenly see myself in the depths of the mirror, I take fright. I think there's enough.
For me, the worst part is that in Portuguese, she doesn't say nowhere, I see myself. And I think this is very important in this sentence.
But when you surprise yourself in front of the mirror,
Yes, it's implied, but she
It's
doesn't
implied.
mention what she's seeing. She doesn't mention herself.
but she gets frightened when she's in front of the, when she surprises.
Yeah.
It doesn't cause me that such big of a problem. I tend to read the same meaning. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what would be the standard way of saying that in English? Having the situation of someone walking and then being surprised by one's own reflection, let's say it's in the evening. How would you say that in English? What would be the standard way? In Portuguese, it seems that it is quando me surpreendo. But in English, how would you say that?
We don't have these, a lot of these reflexive verbs in English.
Maybe I get surprised?
Yeah, quite often it becomes, a sort of a passive. I get surprised, so I was surprised. But, I can't then say when I was surprised in the depths of the mirror, because I wasn't in the depths of the mirror. So it's
maybe I get surprised of myself in the depth of the mirror. I get surprised with myself in the depth of the mirror.
Yeah, just it's not like analyzing what could be better. I think this is not good for me, but I think this is written in a way that it has the intention of being communicative. It's not something that it has the same equivalence. So I didn't understand what is denotative equivalence, because to me, to translate this meaning, the words the exact same way, almost literal. Denotative would be close to literal, what I understood. But here it's not the case.
Okay, so I did just try to explain this. I'll try to explain it again. But I think you know, we've moved away from, you know, word for word, which was really, you know, word for word, as the name suggests, is you know, we're talking about the words on the page. So what we've been exploring, amongst other things, is the fact that words on the page actually refer to meanings. You know, we looked at Saussure's, you know, theory of meaning of langue and parole, things like this. So these words on the page are referring to things that are actually happening. So, you know, that was also part of the exercise of, you know, going below and looking at kernels and trying to sort of find a way of denoting what's actually happening, like a storyboard, you know, beyond the actual words on the page. So now we have the question, you know, the words on the page in Portuguese do not include a word for the, you know, the action of looking through your eyes, you know, seeing. But the situation being described, and now, you know, this is the question we have to ask ourselves. Now, I don't understand Portuguese, so I can't say this exactly, but we have to ask ourselves, is the situation being described 100% obviously a situation in which this person is looking through their eyes at the mirror? Yeah. So if that is happening, and it's very clear that it's happening, you know, then we are still, you know, we're no longer at word for word, but we're still in the area of denotative, because we are denoting what has happened. And what has happened is that they are looking in the mirror. Now, in Portuguese, we don't need to say that, because if I say, you know, and this is my claim now, you know, I'm not, and in English, we find that actually we do need to say this, because if I have any other of the sentences which Drupchen just suggested, it sounds a bit weird in English. because like, in the depths of the mirror, it doesn't really work unless I also say looking into the mirror, or seeing myself in the mirror, or something like this, you know.
But it's exactly the same in Portuguese. It was a choice of the author to not say I saw myself in the mirror. That's why I think this is.
No, I mean, I really don't want, I'm not at all trying to say that you're wrong, Danny. Please don't, you know, I mean, I'm just trying to
I
ask.
can be wrong, but I just can't understand how this is denotative, just because. So denotative is just saying the same thing. It doesn't matter how you say, if you are going to add other words, if you're going to change the sentence, this is denotative. If it's the situation is understood as the same, this is denotative.
Yeah, it's, you know, is it denoting the same that's happening? Is it, you know, at a lexical level, is it doing the same denotation? Is it denoting the same thing? So, you know, the question you're asking is exactly the question we need to be asking, and that is.
Then, you know, I think all of this text is denotative. It's not changing anything. So I don't know.
But you have below the third sentence in Portuguese, we have the same expression with no seeing. And then afterwards, in the fourth sentence, we have seeing, depois de não me ver. So I wonder, I mean, even if in the first two cases, at the denotative level, we don't have the act of seeing in the Portuguese, and then the English has. The question for me to ask was, does the translator manage to give the effect of her? It's her, what's her name? The author, that you were working with, Dani, the Brazilian Clarice Lispector. Does he manage to give the tone, the literary style that Clarice has, or not? And that could take us to the text normative level, which is in the overall translation. Does the translator manages to give Clarice style, to give her literary style and kind of language? You see, because for me, I don't know about, because for instance, when I read this first sentence, I mean, the effect that he managed to give, it's okay for me. It's the effect is there. But I would ask if in other occasions the translation manages to keep this effect, even if at the denotative level or if you want at some formal level, the translator doesn't manage to keep all the aspects of her formal expression.
Must admit, I didn't quite follow you there, so I don't know how to respond.
No, I mean, for me, when I read these two sentences without in Portuguese, you don't have the act of seeing, and in the translation you have. Does the translation manage to get her stylistic style, her tone, or not?
Okay.
So at that point, we would be looking maybe at I don't know if it would be text normative or not, because we are looking at a literary style. And does the translator manage to keep this literary level or not?
This is actually really interesting example here. So I'm
because the author in the third line has the act of seeing in the Portuguese. Depois de não me ver há muito, which is the act of seeing. So yeah, after four lines,
this is interesting, because when she is not denying, she's not saying I see myself. Just after she say, after I have not seen myself.
Yes.
It's the only time that she uses that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When I haven't looked at myself for some time, that bit in English. Is this a sentence you're referring to, Dani?
Yes.
When I haven't looked at myself for some time, and that's the first time in the Portuguese that the verb for looking or seeing is being used.
Seeing, yes.
And when I suddenly see myself in the mirror, I'm not startled. The second use of suddenly see in Portuguese, what is that? The blue.
It's without seeing.
It's the same
again.
It's
the same, suddenly see. Yeah. And I put in blue because actually she says, after I haven't looked at myself. And here it changed a bit, which I understood the same. It changed because of to be more thinking about the readership for some time instead of after.
I don't know Portuguese grammar, so I don't know. But the present perfect in English is doing that after for us in when I haven't looked at myself. So in terms of our analysis, what Katerina has been asking, you know, in terms of like, is she doing this because of is this an example of maintaining the formal level or the text normative level? And the question that Danny is asking in terms of, well, everything is denoting what is happening in the story, so surely everything is denotative. I think this brings us to the sort of the question I did sort of ask in the preparation, and that is, why is this called a hierarchy? So if it was just sort of 5 different sort of types of analysis that all sort of sit next to each other, it wouldn't necessarily be called a hierarchy. But if it's sort of the sort of type of analysis that you do one after the other, then maybe that's why it's called a hierarchy. So we have to look, you know, if I try, and I'm going to make a slight mistakes when I say this now, because I'm going to be rephrasing a little bit. So I'm not Koller. I didn't sort of, you know, devise this theory. I'm not even an expert on this hierarchy. So please forgive me. But if I sort of, the first question I ask myself as a translator is, can I do this with Lexis? You know, can I communicate everything that I need to simply by using very directly equivalent Lexis? Now, within that, and this is the first level of denotative, within that, we still have a hierarchy. We still have this, you know, we still have like word for word, you know, can I use exactly the same words, you know, because that would in some ways be the first step. You know, and then we have, you know, within that lexical level, we still have very equivalent phrases which have, you know, exactly the same meaning basically, but just look a bit different. So, you know, in French, we're using this. We had an example in French where it uses quite a few words, and in English it uses like 4, but it just means exactly the same. We don't really need to argue about that. That's just, you know, a pure lexical equivalence. So if we're still, you know, that's definitely not word for word, but it's still very, very close lexical equivalence. So here, for me, we are at that level, because for me, the words we are using here with, you know, me surprehendo, excuse my pronunciation, or suddenly see myself, for me, the words are different. So it's not word for word, but the, you know, the little blocks of meaning that they convey are just simply denoting what happens. There's nothing else going on. We're not, you know, so it's enough. I don't need to ask the next question. You know, I do have to ask the next question because there might be more than one thing going on. But the first level for me is satisfied, because the seeing for me in this paragraph is there. You know, it is quite obvious. I really don't need to ask the author what was happening, because there's a mirror. You know, 3 sentences later, she does talk about seeing herself in Portuguese, you know, even in Portuguese. So it's happening. The see is happening. It's like when I showed you last week a translation into German, or from German, that I did, where I introduced the verb commissioning the artists. There was no verb for commissioning in the German text, but that's what you do. You know, that's exactly what the emperor does when he says to the artist, build me a statue. He commissions them. So as long as I'm not doing anything unexpected, or as long as I'm not introducing any pragmatics with that new word, I can introduce that new word, because it's, you know, it's just denoting what is happening. So, you know, Danny's question is really, really good. It's like, you know, there's a word, there's see, there's something in English which isn't there, it shouldn't be there. And the question is it doing anything else? Is it doing any pragmatics? Is it changing the communicative situation? Is it introducing any slang? Is it, you know, is it a written word instead of a spoken word? Is it all these other levels, which are next levels in our hierarchy? Is it doing any of that? No. Okay, so it's safe. You know, that's one way of looking at this hierarchy.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, But exactly, if you say that the only thing in surprendo, the only, let's say, units of meaning that are there are to see oneself and that this action is sudden, then I understand that we're staying on the lexical level. But then there is one bit of meaning, one unit of meaning in surprendo that is missing in I see myself suddenly, which is the surprising, the surprise, it's like I get surprised. In English, you have that meaning of being surprised, which is missing here. And so for me, there's something that is missing there on the level of lexicon. And then, like Daniel was saying, there seems to be more than just the words that is going on, because she obviously is making reference to the act of seeing, but doing it indirectly, and only brings the verb negatively only near the end of the first paragraph. So there is a stylistical effect that is intended. So I think there's more than just the lexical level, but maybe I'm wrong, I don't know.
I mean, wrong and right.
It's actually in the last sentence, almost the last sentence in Portuguese, it repeats the surprise. And in this case, the translator chose surprise. I'm also surprised to find. So finally, the translator uses surprise.
Yeah. You know, these are some really good questions, and the next attempt to answer it. I mean, I think
yes,
we have to look at the English word suddenly, and if I'm just speaking as I think now, I'm just trying to find an answer, and suddenly is obviously not always a surprise, but suddenly see is.
It's implied, right?
Yeah. Now, if I then, as a linguist and a teacher, I then try to explain this, I'm like, whoa, how do I explain this one? And it's the difference between see and look. See is something that happens to you. It's there's the difference between like listen and hear, look and see. These verbs in English for the senses, they're very, very clearly, sometimes the meanings overlap, but there's a clear difference between, I listen to music and I hear music. I didn't intend. It's the intention. And there's no intention with see here in this sentence. It's not, I didn't suddenly look. That wouldn't be a surprise. If I suddenly decided to look, I would decide to look. It would be very quick, but suddenly, but it wouldn't be a surprise to me. It might be a surprise to the person next to me, but it wouldn't be a surprise to me. But suddenly see, it's something that happens to me very quickly, and I wasn't expecting it. So it's a surprise. So that's the best the best teacher explanation I can offer, without
so they have more meaning than the words individually say. So we're on either a connotation or pragmatic meaning or something else.
Again, I mean, as a linguist, I'm used to the split between like lexis, grammar, and pragmatics as basically sort of covering everything, really. I mean, that's this sort of three-way, split. And so this is still very much in the region of lexis for me. So I mean, that's all I can say is that the lexical meaning of the verb see is different to the lexical meaning of the word look. It's not pragmatics, it's not connotation, it's just the definition of the word see.
Yes, but we're talking about suddenly seeing. And the surprise came from the conjunction of both of these.
Yeah.
But it isn't.
So it's more like an expression. It's not a word itself, but it's a phrase. I'm being
But
the devil's
isn't
advocate.
this the equivalent for me? As my understanding, my reduced understanding of these things, I would say that I mean, if the translator chose suddenly see for surpreendo, we could study this at the level of the connotative relationship, because he tries to find a way to express this. So it's the connotative level, even if we have eventually the notative situation of seeing or not seeing. Or
Yeah.
so I don't know. Sometimes it's very difficult to. I mean, we can analyze things at several levels, no?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe get a bit mixed up with these several possibilities.
I'm going to suggest we just take a 5 or 10 minute break, just to let our brains, sort of cool down a little bit. But I mean, this is as a teacher, on the one hand, I would like you to find nice, simple examples that fit very squarely into each category so that you don't get confused. And on the other hand, it's the examples which are very much on the border, which then can illuminate the situation for us. So we've probably, within the group of 5 people that we have here, we've probably got like 3 which are loving it and 1 which is getting very confused. So I can't, you can't win whichever way round you go. I hope that it's, useful nonetheless. But for me, this example is great because it really helps us to explore these different categories. But it might be that you're getting confused. So I hope that's not the case.
No,
Let's
okay.
let's take a break and come back in 10 minutes. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to suggest that we approach this from the other direction, just to sort of try and cast a maybe a helpful light on this issue. I've just shared a link, or you can go via the drive to our folder for this week. I put a document in there with the lexical equivalence task. So I thought if we, instead of sort of analyzing down from something to see which of these levels, if we try and build up, we start with the sort of pure lexical meaning. So I put some words for father in English. Have you found the document? Yeah. Okay. So, if we sort of, look at the denotational meaning, what does this denote? It obviously, father denotes, a parent, the male parent. And quite obviously, all of these other words like dad, pa, pop, pater, sire, old man, they all denote the same thing. So at the denotative level, they're equivalent. If you click on the links, I linked you'll find the dictionary entry for some of them, and in those dictionary entries, quite often, there'll be a sort of an explanation. This is informal, or this is archaic, or something like this. And I like this dictionary from Oxford because they also give usage examples. You can sort of unclap some usage examples, and then you sort of often will find very helpful to understand whether there are other levels to this word, or how they differ, so that you can figure out which one is appropriate. So have you might know these words already, or from the dictionary entries, what sort of differences in terms of connotations or communicative situations or readerships, what sort of differences can we identify between these various words? We can just talk about it if you.
Ah, yes. I was wondering if you were expected to write something. or
No, we can
talk or-
just discuss it. Discuss.
Okay. Well, is there really a difference between dad and daddy?
They seem similar to you.
They seem to be both informal and kind of, let's say, a child talking to his father that he loves or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Affective, yeah, that's the word I was looking for. They both seem affective,
Affectionate.
affectionate.
Yeah.
Affectionate.
Anybody else know these words in English? Dad and daddy, or pa and pop and papa? Nerea?
I was thinking daddy is slightly more like a child, younger child.
Yeah.
More affectionate, like a 1+ more than dad, maybe I would hear.
Yeah, I would say.
Familiar. And father, pater, sire, sire, sire. This like more, less used, more archaic.
Archaic, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Daddy is. I mean, I say dad to my father. That's the word that I use is dad. So dad is quite used amongst adults, but daddy is more what a child would say. We also have some sort of occasional like fixed expressions like sugar daddy, which is something very different.
Pop, I didn't know. Pop, I didn't
Pop.
know.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that pop is American.
Yes, I think I saw it in Archie comic strips with Jughead. Those are the things that I could read in Nepal when I was there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, this is pa and papa. Papa seems to be sort of a little bit more universal. Pa, I don't know. I think also for me, pa is also a bit American.
American, yeah. I was going to ask.
Slang, isn't it? More slang.
I mean, I would have to then ask an American friend, exactly how they use them, whether it's the same as dad or but again, these are the issues of readership, aren't they? So what level does this American British difference, what level would we put this on in our hierarchy that we're looking at today? For me, it comes in at the formal level because that for me overarches as well. I mean, they can overlap. There's certain words which have a pure meaning, but it's just a written word or a spoken word or a British word or an American word. This is for me the sort of it's more the formal level for me. It might come in at the pragmatic level because you're talking about a particular readership, but particular readership would refer more to the sort of, I don't know, like a lower level than British and American, which is sort of just overarching. What did you find for pater, sire, old man?
Well, Vetin seems very old.
Yeah.
So either I would expect it to be slang or a very old people saying.
Yeah, I can't even think of a book that I read where that was used.
In French, I think more, yes.
You
would say ton pater. I heard that many times already.
Okay.
And it's kind of in French, it's informal, but then referring to the father with a certain distance.
Okay. So referring with a certain distance, where are we going to put that in on our hierarchy? Is that going to be pragmatics or connotative? Or both?
Yeah, maybe connotative. I don't know.
I mean, I'm sort of, the more I think about this, the more I, think that perhaps Koller is using pragmatic in a sort of a different way to the way I understand pragmatic. But if in the novel that I'm translating, the character who is the narrator or the character in a dialogue uses sire or old man with a particular sort of with a particular sort of effect in order to achieve a particular effect. So perhaps they want to show respect, or perhaps they want to be sarcastic, or perhaps they want to be insulting, or something like this. Then within that situation, that is the pragmatics. So I can sort of analyze that as the pragmatics of the situation. They are intending to achieve an effect with their choice of word. The effect on the reader may or not be something we can call, connotative, and there's going to be a connotative sort of element to this anyway, because within this dialogue, if these characters are in a particular social group, they're going to use a particular slang. So I'm going to have to bear all of that in mind, and I need to use the words that have that connotation for my reader, so that my reader then knows this is that person from this type of social group. But within that dialogue, they are using it for a certain effect. So that's the pragmatics. So all of that has to come in, so we can analyze a particular usage of the word at these different levels. So that's why there is this hierarchy. They don't exclude each other. In some ways, they sort of go on top of each other, Let's instead of looking at things and analyzing that, let's go into that other direction now and move down to the next exercise, where I ask you to think of some words that all have the denotative meaning of car. So we have this vehicle that we all know what a car is. So let's try to think of some words similar to the different words for father, some words for car which may have different connotations or be used in different styles or have different slang or something like this.
Drupchen, comeste bocadinho da palavra. Comeste o meu veículo.
I am in two.
I didn't put French. I put
There's two Drupchens.
Tomorrow.
I'm on the Tibetan sign, but yeah, this kind of longer.
Popo.
It's for
I have never
children.
seen that.
It's for children. Popo.
So we're doing car, not father. I mean, I guess I have to add one to my English list now. So gonna have a child word.
Mistura, muito bem. Vocês me viram os sinónimos todos. Carango!
This is very old slang.
I have only one word.
For Tibetan or what?
Yes, mota.
Mota.
Langkor.
Langkor is, you're talking about langba, so it's kind of steam.
Oh, they use here, the Tibetans in Brussels
Langkor?
use Langkor.
But for Chichu Langkor, for bus,
No, for car.
car also, they use Langkor? I wrote it, then I took it off because I found, well, cars don't use steam.
Mm.
And that was how trains started, steam engines. And Gerkor is a Bhutanese word.
Remember, it was in the text you showed me first time we talked together.
Mhm.
I didn't know what it was, but I know Gergi Labcha, Tanshungi Labcha.
Really.
Okay.
There's a word in Tibet itself as well, because when I started saying Mota, they said, "Oh, you learned your Tibetan in India, didn't you?" What are they? What was the word for car?
Some Chinese word.
Yeah, I mean they've obviously got the Chinese loan words as well, but yeah, I can't remember now.
Yeah, motor stands for motor. The
Yeah.
engine.
Yeah,
motor,
it's
yes.
the English loan
Yes,
word,
yes.
isn't it? Yeah, motor. Okay, so let's have a look. What we got? The Spanish ones. Tell us about the connotations, the communicative, the pragmatics, and everything else about these words you've chosen.
Coche is the word used in Spain, the normal word. It has different registers of language, so it would be, but I still don't know how about these denotative and things. I'm not.
Well, the basic denotative meaning
It has
is
to be compared to others. For example, the car. That do all of them have a, for example, denotative? Yes. What does it denote? Yeah, I'll keep my notes next. Yeah,
they
you
all.
know, if somebody speaking is a Spanish speaker, probably, because in South America they would talk more about auto. In Mexico they would say a carro. The association, for example, a connotative one would be very difficult to say. A carro in Spain would be slang.
Okay.
So that I would say it's then what is it? Connotative?
Yeah, slang would be,
Yeah. Automobile. It's in a prospect of a car, of very, very much educated people. Préstame tu automóvil, but it wouldn't be so used. So that would be text normative, maybe.
Yes, because you would be looking at a formal brochure, advertising. Yeah.
And
could also be formal, because you'd be talking about the sort of the genre or the style. We could
that
analyze
would be more the Berlina. Berlina is really rarely used. and it also indicates what type of car it is. It's not a familiar, it's more a certain type of car, big car, comfortable car. So it has all these, it has this meaning included in it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
what does it, that would be denotative?
You know, you will find in you know, you will find words that maybe in their original meaning are at the denotative level are different because they're quite clearly not just a generic car, but we're talking about a big car or a car with this certain feature. You might find a word that originally has a difference at the denotative level, but then becomes slang for the same general word of car or father. So, if we were then going to be talking about all the specialist words for the special types of cars, they wouldn't really be coming into this list because they would have a different meaning at the denotative level. It wouldn't just mean this car anymore. It would mean something slightly different. Do you understand what I mean? What I'm trying to say?
Yes, that it can be, can be used as a slang. I think that is, I think I got it.
Yeah. I mean, we could even look at the Tibetan and sort of, look at what Drupchen was saying, with Langhor, that we could analyze that maybe as having actually a different denotative meaning in some places, but in other places it means exactly the same as Mota. And then what is the difference? So. So what about the Portuguese? What do we got? Dani or Catarina?
It depends if it's Brazilian Portuguese or Portuguese. Because, for example, viatura in Portugal, I think it's the most common, Catarina. It's pretty common, yeah.
Let's say that viatura, it's normal, common, but it's used for, actually vehicle, it's used for formal papers, formal documents, like your registration to drive, the driver license. You would use, I think it's vehicle.
Yeah, Brazil would be the same, vehicle and automobile. But viatura in Brazil is just the car of a police. We don't even say police's car, we say viatura.
Okay.
And then and it's weird because when I first arrived here, it was very weird to hear viatura for cars, but now it's becoming common. It's I don't even have this feeling of being weird anymore. But in Brazil, it's just that you will not think about something else.
Okay, so this is a good example of what I was just trying to explain. Yeah, so in one country, this has actually a different meaning at the lexical, at the denotative level.
Yes, totally.
But then it has to also be in this list because in the other country it means car, but with a different connotation or a different,
But I thought, well, it's it's less lexical, of course, in connotative, but would you consider that to be extra textual in the sense that it's cultural or not? Cultural reference in that sense, not so much in the vehicle, but okay. But let's say something which is more connected to culture. It is what is said there has an extra textual reference, right?
Yeah.
And that
I wouldn't say extra textual. I would say that it's different types of different kinds of the same language.
Yes, but when you're translating, because you don't, for instance, a word which might exist in the two languages or very close words, but it has different meanings, which is, I think, the false friends that it was the example of the other day. Would you say that this is something which is cultural and then it's extra textual in the sense that is a cultural reference or not?
Boy, yeah, we're getting into the fine points of the definition, aren't we, really? It's quite clearly a cultural reference. Just the meanings are the well, I have to be careful with the words I use. You know, when does this cultural reference become so what's the word? I don't know. Become so embedded in the lexis that the word becomes, in a way, a different word. You know. So when did Xerox stop being the name of a company and start being a verb meaning to photocopy? Though that's a sort of a comparable transition, you know. So when did, you know, the culturally colored word become a word in its own right? That sort of thing. That's a very difficult question to answer. So I don't know if I can answer it. You know. But we're looking at the right things here. You know, it's, if I was to, you know, take an English example, the word motor. You know, we've had the Tibetanized version of it already, but, you know, strictly speaking, the motor is part of a car. You know, it's the bit of the car, that complicated sort of bit that makes the car move. You know, but, you know, within certain regions or dialects or slangs, you know, my motor means my car. So it has to be in our list of words that mean car, because it does. It just, you know, in that slang, in that dialect, in that social group, it just means car. It has no other denotational meaning than the word car. It's the same. But in the sort of formal dictionary level, you know, in the standard English, those two words wouldn't be in the same list, because at the denotative level they denote something different. One denotes the, you know, the mechanics, and one denotes the whole thing. You know. What about Karango? I'm curious to know.
It's a very old slang, like from the 60s, 70s. It is the way people would call a car they really like. It's not really a good car. It's just a meu carango. And then possante is from the same period, but then possante is a very powerful car, a very good car.
Is it related to the word for power? Possante?
Yes, yeah. Also, yes. And banheira, it's a bad connotation. You say that when someone has a very old car, a very old and big car. You say you have a banheira. Yeah.
Old and big.
Yes, old and big.
What about old and small?
Banheirinha.
We used to use the word banheira, which is a bathtub, okay?
Yeah, it's a bathtub.
It's a bathtub.
It's a bathtub.
And we used to use that, I think, in the 80s because of the Mercedes, these big Mercedes, right? And in Portugal, how do you call it? These people who construct buildings, the constructors, you know, constructors? The constructors of buildings, right? Yeah. They would get rich very fast. It was fast money, right? And and they used to buy the Mercedes, right? So they use the banheiras.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. What about the Tibetan ones then? Talk us through.
There's really not much to say because it's something that it's a thing in for Tibetan that is very new.
Okay.
So they don't have so much things to say. Yeah, Modra is, I would say, at least in Nepal and India, the standard.
Yeah.
And there's no connotation. It's just the neutral word. Lankor, for me, it has the connotation of being public transport, but it looks like in Belgium not.
Yeah.
And Gerkhor, I would say that it is Bhutanese.
Ger is private, yeah?
Yes, it's private, yeah.
Yeah. I got a
Yeah.
feeling that one's familiar to me as well, maybe from Lhasa, I'm not sure.
Okay. Then I don't know.
Chichi Lanko is Chichi is the public, and then
Yes,
Gerko is car for private, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, private, maybe, yeah.
Maybe same in Lhasa. Yeah.
Possible.
But yeah, they probably use the Chinese. Okay. So I got some English ones I prepared earlier, and I added a couple more just because if you're going to put Popo in there, then thought I better put vroom vroom.
Vroom vroom. It sounds like the English broom. How do you call it? Vassoura. How do you say it in English?
Broom.
The
Yeah,
broom. Yes,
well-
it sounds like the broom.
Well, actually, I first wrote it with a B because it's one of these words which doesn't really have a spelling because
It's kake.
you only use it when you're talking to like 3-year-olds. But I did spell it originally with a B, and I think a lot of people would put boom boom, but it's actually this sort of sound, so it's not really a B or a V. Yeah, car, automobile, motor, limousine, limo, banger, jalopy, or wheels. Wheels is sort of a London gangster, my wheels. Motor is, I think, is I think it's quite common in England as a sort of slang, sort of a spoken level, my motor. In fact, my dad always refers to his jam jar, which some of you might realize where that comes from. In the East End of London, they have this, what they call Cockney rhyming slang. So they have special words which rhyme with the original word. So jam jar rhymes with car. So, and then you have like stairs, the stairs in your house are the apple and pears. There's a whole language of words that rhyme. And so my dad, that's his everyday word. He'll talk about the jam jar. If we're going out for the day, when I visit my parents, then he'll, as the driver, he goes to get the car out of the garage first before we leave the house, and he says, "Oh, I'm just going to fetch the jam jar," and it's just like that's how he refers to it. Jalopy is probably a word that the translator of Drupchen's French novel would use. sort of old sort of old word, Downton Abbey type word. Banger is also, I think, an old word nowadays. Limousine, really, I think is probably, you're getting along the lines of a Posante or something. Limousine is sort of more of a posh, large car, but
that is the same in Portugal. But is the word French, or it sounds like French, isn't it? Limousine, but probably is not. But we use it also that word. We don't have our own.
Limousine can be a regular sized car, or
No, the
only
limousine is
these
the ones that we know from
brands?
America. From America, very long.
Is it that brand? No, but I'm asking Craig because he put it into
Oh,
this
yeah,
this
okay.
list. Could it be any brand, or is it a specific brand limousine?
It's not a brand, no.
Not a brand. It
I
could be
don't.
any brand.
It could be any brand or sort of make of car. The words about cars are incidentally completely different between America and Britain. You even just all the words that I would use to say, well, I was driving my car and I changed gear and I stopped at the traffic lights and I turned left. It would sound completely different in American. All those verbs, all those nouns, traffic lights, turn left, change gear, they're all different in American. These are all very, very, so limousine, I think in America means something different. For a British person, a limousine is something you hire when you have a wedding, it's, hardly anybody actually owns one, you just hire them for special occasions. But in America, it might be a standard car, I don't know.
So it is this long car that seems so long that it would crumble in the middle, right?
Well, it doesn't have, that's a stretch limousine.
Yeah. Okay, a stretch limousine.
Yeah.
Some gangsters use them.
Yeah. Just the normal big long cars, that aren't stretched, but they're still long.
Okay, yeah. In French, it would only be the stretched ones.
Okay. Yeah.
That would be French.
Yeah. No, those stretch limos, that's what we would call a stretch limo. Yeah. So, we're still at the level of one word here. Obviously this is, what we really need to do is sort of build up to phrases and sentences, but you've already found some of those in your sample translations. And so, what I wanted to do was just briefly sort of go in the other direction of starting with the bottom denotative level and sort of adding to it. And we see that, we can add to it in terms of a connotation, in terms of like a, maybe a posante or something, which has this connotation. It does mean car. It just, but it has this connotation of something big and powerful. Automobile for an English person would have certain connotations because we would normally just say car, but the Americans again would be different. So, certain slang that would definitely still be at the connotative level, the slang in terms of like, my motor, my wheels, my jam jar, you would very much put that at the geographical origin, slang, social group, that would definitely be here at the connotative level. So if you had a character in your book who said jam jar, you would instantly know that they were from the east of London, even if nothing else in the book had told you that already, because it's just that's where the word is used. Again, added on to that or next to it or independently of it, all of these levels are like, Lego blocks we can put on top of each other, overlap each other, or use, independently. We could look at the text normative level, and again, I think that's a bit more difficult to use on individual words. But what could we say there in our list of cars or fathers?
Vehículo is the only word used for official papers, also in Spanish, like Katarina was saying.
Yeah, that's it. And the brochures, you had the example, didn't you, of advertising, brochures, things like that. These are, they're designed to have a certain function in a certain type of publication, a certain communicative situation. I'm advertising, I'm applying for a license, this type of thing. where the border between that and particular readership is, that's a good question, because obviously the readership of advertising or car brochures are a particular readership. So this pragmatic level, again, we've talked about pragmatics a lot already, I think enough. And for me, the level of formal, the style, is one which overlaps on all of this, because if I've already identified the difference between British and American at the connotative level, then that's also actually a style level for me as well. So I don't really know what the, that would be a sort of, which one it falls into would depend on the actual text that I was translating, the situation. Yeah, so any more questions? Otherwise, we've used up our time for today. We haven't looked at all of your things that you found, but if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an example and say what I would analyze this as such and such. Do you agree? I mean, I can look at what you found if we didn't have time to look at that today. We have only one more session because the semester is ending. That's what I've been told. So next week, I will use for no more new content, but rather for a sort of evaluation, a sort of not a test as such, but just something to see if I can see whether you've learned anything these past few weeks. So what I want to do is I will give you a so we will come online at the usual time. I will come online an hour early, so I will come online at the beginning of your study time. I won't wait until the hour later. I'll come on at the same time as you. I will give you a text which I would like you then to translate. It'll only be quite short. And I would like you to use the first hour to prepare, to start translating that. Then in the 2.5 hours after that, you will take turns and you will have 20 minutes each to present your translation to us, but to walk us through it. So I want to sort of, I want you to sort of show us how you did it, what you did before you started reading, what you did when you read, what, that sort of process of translation. So as I said, it'll only be a paragraph. It doesn't matter if you finish it. I just want to see, that you started it, that you thought about it, first few sentences that you translated, and you can tell us whether you chose this because it was connotative, denotative, or whatever it is. You could just walk us through how you chose to translate that. So you'll have an hour to prepare that, and then we will, present it to each other. During that hour at the beginning, I will take you away individually just for 5 minutes. So you'll have, 50 minutes preparation time. I'll take you each out just for 5 minutes, just to have a quick one-to-one. Just very, very quick, just 5 minutes. Yeah, that's the plan for next week. So you don't necessarily need to prepare anything, but you might want to go back over your notes that we have so far. Is that clear?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Then I'm finished. Over to you, Drupchen, unless anyone else has any questions.